Good evening. Welcome to Holy Land of Hoops 2024-25 College Hoops Preview Show. Coming to you, recorded back on the 18th of September. And right now we're going to get started with Tristan Freeman. Tristan Freeman, the editor of Busting Brackets, been with Busting Brackets for at least, 10 years, Tristan?
You're nearly you go going on six now.
Oh, only
Yeah.
six. But Tristan's well documented, well recognized basketball expert. We're looking for a couple more people, but we're gonna move ahead forward right now. And if they show up, then we'll introduce them as they come on in. Um, this 2024-25 basketball preview is sponsored by the Holy Land of Hoops. Holy Land of Hoops is the Vatican of college hoops message boards, and they've been a sponsor of this preview show for the last several years, and we're proud to say that we're sponsored by Holy Land of Hoops. 'Top 25, they've got good old Kansas as number one, Bama 2, UConn 3, Houston 4, and Gonzaga 5. Um, I don't think most people in the country would have any problem with that order, that pecking order of the top 25. And if they did, I'm sure they would have a good reason for that. But Kansas and Alabama by far are two of the strongest teams in the country, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be ranked that high early. Of course, both have a very challenging non-conference slate, so that's subject to change. But as far as coming out of the opening gate, I think that's a fairly great assessment on the part of ESPN. Would you say so, or would you?
Yeah, I think when looking at teams, there are three ways to examine the roster. Their incoming recruiting class, if they get 5 stars, the transfer class, considering how prevalent the transfer portal is, and if you return star players. And those two teams in particular check all the boxes.
Yeah,
Alabama has Mark Sears back as arguably the best guard in the country if you want to
yes, sir.
debate him with RJ Davis. And then they had an incredible transfer class that includes Cliff Mourier from Rutgers and
Mhm.
the guards. So you look at those two teams, they have pretty much everything you want. I mean, Kansas has Hunter Dickinson back, DeJuan Harris, Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. And then their transfer class was so good, they effectively had one of them leave and Riley Kugel, who would have been a quality transfer for any other team, and he was pretty much boxed out.
Right.
And you have AJ Storr coming in from Wisconsin, who averaged 17 a game. He's already a power conference star. It's just hard, just on paper. There really are no other rosters that can compete with them to start the season. Now, I think there's a good case that Houston and Gonzaga, two teams who return a ton of production and two teams that
Right.
win 30 plus games every year, they're going to be in the mix and they'll probably be ranked number one at some point in the season. So I definitely think they are definitely top 20, top five teams as well. And of course, UConn. I mean, the team that
Yeah.
won 2 straight national titles. You could argue their roster on paper, if you remove what they've done in the past, might not be top 10 caliber, but are you going to say that Dan Hurley isn't going to find a way to make them
Exactly.
contenders again? Like they just on reputation alone, they've earned a top 5 spot. Whether they'll remain that way remains to be seen, but they've earned the benefit of doubt.
Right. Right. I agree wholeheartedly. It's hard to go against any of those five teams. That's true. Who do you see maybe being a surprise in that top 25? For example, Rutgers is actually ranked, and Ohio State is ranked fairly well. You know,
Yeah, one team that had a quietly really good offseason is Ole Miss. I mean, the first year with Chris Beard, they were, I think, one of the last two unbeaten teams, but then struggled in league play. They returned Matthew Morrell to their leading scorer. They returned Jalen Brakefield, their best big man. And then had an elite transfer class of their own. I mean, Sean Purdue averaged 16 a game at Virginia Tech. You bring in Dre Davis, average 15 at Seton Hall. I mean, obviously, Kadari Richmond got all the PR, but
Yeah.
Davis was just as good. And then Malik Dia was one of the stars at Belmont too when they had their three transfer class. So Ole Miss roster could be top 10 quality. I mean, they're loaded and they're top 8. We'll see how it all fits, but I think they're a team that could be really good in the SEC. And obviously Texas and Oklahoma joins them, so all eyes will be on them. But don't be surprised if Ole Miss could be the team that really breaks out and goes from the bottom half to a top 4 spot.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Um, what about Auburn? Do you have any idea, any feelings on Auburn?
Well, I mean, the fact that they returned their front court, I mean, led by Janai Broome, one of the best big men in the country, one of the best two-way guys, he instantly is going to make them good. You know, Chad Baker Mazzaro was one of the top impact JUCO guys. He's back, and even though he got himself ejected in the NCAA tournament loss, you know, he's someone that is a proven guy in the SEC level. It's going to come down to the guard play. They lost their guards. Katie Johnson's gone. They lost a former 5-star guy to Alabama, but they bring in JD Preggs, who averaged I think it's like 17 a
Yeah.
game. Of Freeman. They have another 5-star guy in Tahad, forgetting his name, but Tahad Pettiford, and they add Miles Kelly, who led Georgia Tech in scoring. So it's a new look backcourt. I have questions on if they'll be successful in the SEC. If it is, they'll be a top 15 team. If it's not, they'll still have a high floor just because of how good Broome in the front court is.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's a bit of a variance with them and how good they can be.
This Pegs guy, he's from Furman, right?
Yes.
You think he's going to be able to make that switch, make that jump to high major like play?
I mean, it feels random. I mean, there are guys who average 18 to 20 points a game in the lower levels, move up and only average around 8 to 10, or some really struggle even more. Then there are guys who just, you know, you figured they would just be okay and end up being stars. I think a really good example with Ole Miss, I mentioned before, they had a transfer from St. Peter's who averaged like 8 a game, and he comes in, and I and many others assume he would just be a bench piece. Ends
Yeah.
up being the second or third best player, and now he's back for them as well. So you know, it really does feel like a crapshoot. Whichever one of these transfers works out for their teams, they're going to be contenders. And then whichever ones don't, their teams are going to be in rough shape. Now, these teams added a bunch of them, so the odds of having success are now higher. But it will be interesting to see which of these guys work out their new spots.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me what you're saying about Pegs. Kind of reminds me of what people were talking about with Shireman at Creighton a couple
Yes.
of years ago. And look what happened to him. He wound up becoming a star, even getting drafted, which surprised me, you know. Um, Speaking of bringing in a lot of people, Kentucky. I mean, they got a damn hockey line change, you know? What do you think is going to happen with that mess?
Yeah, so a lot of these guys were sort of second and third best players at their previous spots. The exception would be Jackson Robinson, who follows Mark Provo from BYU, the sixth man of the year, but he was clearly the team's best player. And you know, a lot of talent. I mean, Kirk Risa was a starter for an Arizona team that won 60 games in 2 years. Otega Owe was a starter at Oklahoma. Kobe Brayer led the nation in three-point shooting at Dayton and was the sixth man of the year in the A10. And then you have Andrew Carr, who was one of the best true stretch forwards in the country from Wake Forest. So there's a lot of talent, and they have plenty of depth. Which of them will end up being the star? Because there's going to have to be a pecking order that's created at Kentucky, unless they truly can just be a scenario where one guy stars each game. And maybe depth does work out, but we all know that these coaches are going to limit the rotations to 7 and 8 at some point. So who's going to
Yeah,
be part of that rotation? Who's going to be the stars? Are some of these guys like Krisa going to be consistent enough to run the offense? And you know, I think talent-wise, they're a top 25 team, but they're also another one that I could see things going really well, or I could see there being a lot of speed bumps.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because with the reliance on transfers nowadays more and more, it seems that every year you're not you're not um, tweaking the system. You're retooling the whole damn machine. You know, every year or 3 out of 4 years. And in Kentucky's case and Arkansas's case, with Calipari moving to Arkansas, he brought practically everybody he had at Kentucky with him to Arkansas, and Pope comes in the door and has to go shopping on the transfer market just to find players. It's interesting, and I don't know if that's going to work consistently. Now, maybe he can make it work this year, but he's got to do. He's at Kentucky. Mark Pope. He's at Kentucky. He can't be relying on transfers every year. He's got to start bringing in some of the blue chippers. Otherwise, he's not going to be there very long. You know?
Yeah, and I think for a lot of the first year head coaches, and you can include Eric Musselman over USC, we
Yeah.
have a completely empty roster because everyone left after the coaching change.
Yeah.
You
So
have to fill it up to be as competitive as possible. Because what you don't want to do is have a first year that's so down that it could scare future recruits and transfers who want to join you. So be
exactly.
as good as you can with whoever, and then you can start building your foundation with the next recruiting class, and then you can be more selective with transfers, and you can keep guys who aren't seniors and still have eligibility left. So I
Yeah.
do think if you exclude the first year head coaches who had to completely rebuild, most of the coaches ideally want to bring in a 3-man recruiting class, 3 to 4 transfers, and keep their top 4 or 5 eligible returning guys and try to make that work. And most did. And the ones that did, like Gonzaga and Houston, for example, and the top teams, they're preseason contenders to watch, and others who couldn't do that had to effectively rebuild all over.
Yeah. Yeah. I I think that most new coaches get 2 or 3 years of grace. So in most cases, I don't know if one could say that about Kentucky if they're going to give them that much rope, but nonetheless, most new coaches will get a couple 3 years of grace. Um, while we're in the top 25, and the Big 12 has what 6, 8 teams in the top 25. Uh, what about the migration? All the Pac-12 teams coming into the Big 12. What do you forecast or what do you see?
Yeah, I think of the 4 newcomers, obviously UCLA and Arizona with their pedigree and their standards, both of them are ranked. Both of them has plenty of potential. Caleb Love coming back as Pac-12 Player of the Year instantly makes Arizona a contender, and UCLA brings back their 2 best players, their guards, and adds a really good 6-man transfer class.
UCLA.
Yeah, they brought back Dylan Andrews and Sebastian Mack from
Oh,
last year. They lost. They ended up losing the European guys who didn't work out for them, and Dembona, but they were able to bring back their not only 2 best guys, a Damar who was a previous potential lottery pick. We'll see if he's a sophomore breakout contender. But those 2 teams will be fine. I think Utah and Colorado are going to be rebuilding a bit. Both of those teams lost a lot via the draft and the portal. Obviously, Cody Williams is gone, who was a lottery pick for them. And Utah loses several players who transfer portal, and Brayton Carlson's gone. So I think those 2 are going to start towards the bottom, and UCLA and Arizona is going to start towards the top half. But this is a loaded league. I mean, I think there's 5 teams in the top 10 of the preseason rankings, and there's a few others going to be ranked, as you said, so it won't be easy. But I think there's a good case to be made that the Big 12 is the deepest league entering the season
I'm thinking.
when it
I'm
comes to at
thinking.
least top tier.
I'm thinking Arizona State, not UCLA.
I'm sorry. My apologies. My apologies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Usually is
Yeah.
in the Big Ten. Yeah. Yeah. Arizona State had a really good offseason. They add 2 of the top mid-major transfers in Jashir Bahad, and they added a 20-point score from the Horizon League. And then they had 2 5-star freshmen. They technically took Arizona's top guy, Jason Sonnen, and then
Yeah.
they added Jaden Quaintance, who was a former Kentucky commit, and he was famous this offseason because he had an NIL bag of reportedly 2 million or at least a million plus. So we'll see. And I think he's the youngest player in college basketball. So seeing what he's going to do for them will be very, very interesting because they pretty much lost their entire rotation from a team that wasn't good enough to win last year. But between the transfers with big numbers and the freshmen, they're going to be one of the most interesting teams to watch because, again, if it works out, Bobby Hurd looks like a genius.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, then he's probably going to be on the hot seat. But it's interesting that they suddenly have a lot of funds and sort of compete in the Big 12 because they're definitely going to. They're going to need it. Sure.
Okay. All right. You mentioned the youngest player in college basketball. As an aside, the oldest player in college basketball is this Euro that Creighton's just bringing over. If he's not the oldest, he's one of the oldest. Fedor Zucic, Montenegro guy. He's been playing pro 5 years in Europe. He's an old man.
Yeah, and that's quietly another storyline to watch. That there's been an influx of European players who I believe with the new NIL rules and seems like to be some kind of relaxation of what qualifies as a pro out there. Because a lot of these guys did play in pro leagues, but now these guys are coming in and, like you said, older players with pro experience and it's risky. Some of these guys end up being national stars, like Azuolas Tubelis was at Arizona, being All-American. And then there's plenty others who quietly don't get off the bench, and then after a year or so, quietly just goes back home. So it'll be really interesting to see which of these international players become stars because that it can impact the game even more than just your regular decent freshmen because these guys are experienced and have no problem competing at the highest levels.
Right. And maybe he's going to be another Seton Hall, Mamu and stuff,
Yeah.
You know. Or maybe it'll be another Canclares at Creighton, which was pretty much a bust, Anyway. Okay. Top conference, Big 12?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think clearly at the top, Big 12.
You got a pecking order?
I think right now I would go with Kansas,
No.
Houston.
Conference.
Conference. Yeah. Conference, I would go with Big 12, SEC, Big East, ACC, Big 10.
And that's it.
Yeah, there's no more Pac-12.
The Pac-12, but they're bringing on Mountain West teams, So I don't know what kind of outcome to expect from that sort of experiment, bringing on not Fresno State.
Well, yeah, they're part of four. Them, Colorado State, San Diego
it is
State,
Fresno State. Yeah, it's the state: San Diego State, Fresno State, Colorado State, and what's the fourth one?
Boise State.
And boy, yeah. That's really reaching. That's reaching. But Washington State and Oregon State got plenty of money. The conference has plenty of money from all the payouts from the teams who left. That I guess buyout clauses or penalties or whatever, escape clauses or whatever, plus all the money from the last 4, 5, 6 years worth of NCAA payouts. So there's plenty of money to go around. It's going to be interesting to see how they break all these mid-major new majors into the league. Whether they're going to make them on a graduated payment kind of schedule, or if they're going to get full shares. Of course, full shares of what is yet to be seen because I guess they'll have to work a new contract.
Yeah, we'll see what they do because it'll be 2 years from now. And then the latest rumors are that Memphis and Tulane could join them. We'll see if Gonzaga is ever a part of it. I mean, considering they're the top, free agent basketball brand out there, they're not going to the Big 12 or the Big East. Could the
Yeah.
Pac-12 be their new home and sort of, have a basketball footprint? But that's definitely going to be something to watch the next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, even if Gonzaga was to join, I mean, they're going to join at a discount because they don't have football.
Right.
So, so I mean, maybe they do like Notre Dame and squeeze an extra million or two, but they're not going to get more than 7 to 10 million. The Zags. Of course, that's an upgrade. Over what a big upgrade over what they're getting in the West Coast Conference. But I can't see them getting 15 or 20 million because they don't have football. You know. Anyway, okay. Who's dancing from each conference? How many?
Ooh, not the biggest bracketologist, but if I had to get like an estimate range, I think the Big 12 can probably get between 8 and 10. I think the SEC could probably get around 8 as well. The Big 10, even in its down years, will always find a way to get at
Yeah.
least, I think, 6 to 8. The ACC is probably around the 5 to 7 range. And then
Mm,
don't forget, we have an extra bid available because there's no Pac-12. So that's likely going to go to one of the top conferences. And I think the Big East can probably get 5 to 6 as well. Hopefully that adds up. But I do think that the SEC and Big 12 are going to have the
yeah.
most bids.
Yeah, pretty much like last year. They pretty much ran the show. Uh, Results wise, they didn't do all that, but that's a Big Ten type of postseason. You get a bunch of teams in, and nobody goes very far. But and except in the case of Purdue, of course, for the Big Ten. Um, that you said a bid or two bids since we don't have a Pac-12.
Yeah, one extra bid because that auto bid's gone. So
Oh,
that
you're
becomes
talking
now.
the auto bid. Okay. You're talking the auto bid.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Um, who's your final four?
So early. I don't want to do the whole four best teams. So I feel like the four teams that I think could be most successful in March would be Alabama, Gonzaga. I'm gonna go. I really like I like Tennessee because I like their guard play. And if
Tennessee,
I,
Tennessee, the Volunteer.
yeah,
Okay,
and
they were
if I
tough
had to,
last year.
yeah, if I had to find like a sneaky team to watch, look out for Kansas State. I mean, they had a really good offseason.
Mhm.
They bring in Coleman Hawkins, Ugonna Ayenzo could be one of the premier defensive bigs in the country, and Doug McDaniel can score 20 anytime. So I feel like they're a team that might not be the top 25 mix and might be a little too offensive friendly at times, but they could be a team that can make some noise. And we've seen Jerome Tang, do some things already. So why not
Yeah,
possibly with a better roster?
yeah. Uh, UConn, UConn.
At some point, they gotta lose in March. At some point, that has to happen. They can't win 100 straight games in March. But I've already Dan Hurley's already made me and everyone else look stupid twice. Why not make it three in a row?
Yeah, yeah. Um, your champ.
I think this is going to be Alabama's to lose. They
Oh,
got the top
okay.
scorer, they got the defensive presence inside, and Nate Oates already broke one glass ceiling for the program by getting to the Final Four. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the roster that is good enough to have him win it all.
Well, we're definitely going to find out early whether they can, meet the challenge because they're going to be in the Players Festival in Vegas, and
Mhm.
and they're playing Houston, and they're playing Rutgers, and they're playing I can't remember the other team in their bracket, but there's Bama, Houston, Rutgers, and I can't
I
remember
don't,
the other team.
I don't know if it's Notre Dame, but
Yeah, it is
uh,
Notre Dame. It's
uh,
Notre Dame. Yeah, but we're gonna find, and then they play Creighton at home in December the 8th, I think. So that's going to be a date to watch. They're going to get tested pretty darn often in the preseason. So we'll find out whether or not they've got what it takes, or at least whether or not they can have that talent rounding into shape by the time the conference hits around to see. I'm just glad you didn't say Kansas, but a couple quickies since it's just you and me. Couple quick hits. The Vegas Nil tournament, supposedly a million uh, in potential events and activities and blah 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 for each team when they're not playing on the court. Two 4-team MTEs. We talked about Bama and Houston and the one. On the other side, you're talking Oregon, Creighton, A&M, and San Diego State, the new Pac-12 team. So these MTEs supposedly are separate under the umbrella of the Players Festival. And supposedly, if I read this correctly a month or two ago, the winners of each of the MTEs may have an opportunity to play each other in a separate game. I don't know if that's going to pass muster with the NCAA or not. So I don't know if that will ever come to be. But it's a novel concept, a lot of money. Creighton backed out of the battle for Atlantis and a stacked deck down there just to get in this thing because of the $1 million. You know that potential nil money. And the winner gets $1 million, and each MTE supposedly gets $1 million. So it's potentially a game changer in the MTE arena of college sports. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as long as the sponsors and the event holders make money for it, I think if everyone's getting paid $1 million, then there better be 10 million in revenue. And to
Yeah.
have this during Feast Week with all the other tournaments, I mean, we're still going to watch the Battle for Atlantis. We're still going to watch the Maui Invitational. We're
Oh, of
still going to
course,
watch the other marquee matchups in the
of
week.
course.
And don't forget, there's still the NFL on during that week as well. So if there's money to be made from it and there's a future of it, then great. Then that'll be the future. If not, then I'm never really even though it's more great basketball, I'm always more interested to see if there's a renewal instead of a one and done situation because it
Yeah,
very well could be.
yeah, yeah. Um, on the nil front, you mentioned the one kid that was supposedly secured a $2 million bag. You know, um, more of the same, or we're going to see Congress finally step up and put the brakes on some of this.
I don't think there's ever going to be an agreement in Congress as to what it should happen on a national level. I think you're seeing states do their own thing. I think the state of Georgia just had a law that allows schools to just basically directly pay players if they want to, and NCAA can't do anything. I think ultimately the free markets is going to decide. Like they're like Great Osobor reportedly got 2 million to follow his coach over to
Yeah,
Washington. Is he
yeah,
worth 2 million? No, but was he worth for Washington to pay him? Yeah. And then other guys like Coleman Hawkins, who was late to pick a team, probably got more money as well. So I think ultimately it's just a free market thing. And if teams have the money to do it, then all I'm all for it.
yeah. I think you're right about the market will correct. If we look at Ruiz down in Miami, you know, Ruiz was throwing money around like it was toilet paper, and all of a sudden now, he's hitting the brakes because his baby, his company, is going under or has the potential to go under. So all of a sudden, instead of giving the Cavenger twins this and giving I can't remember the guard he was had a couple of guards down there he was giving money to a couple of years
Nigel
ago.
Pack.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Nigel Pack. All that kind of stuff. And now his corporate market is telling, hey, what the hell are you doing? Putting the brakes on some of that and causing him to show a little bit more fiscal responsibility, perhaps, and definitely opening the eyes of the competitors, the fat cat at the University of Florida, the guy at Florida State, and the other collectives around the country. The market will correct eventually. Maybe some sooner than others, but yeah, I agree with your point. The market will take care of a lot of this. That's true.